Very lucky of being so young, I started to not remember stuff. But it was very hard on the older children because they remembered. And my brother, who was 4 years older than I, suffered a lot under this. He had a nervous breakdown in his 20s. And what they would do with the young boys, they would get them, light them up, and say, today you're going to die. And they'd shoot at their feet, and they'd shoot at their heads, and then they'd send them off and do the same thing all over the next day just to harass them. And my brother said sometimes he wished they would kill him. So this was in 1945 when we were put in camp. That fall, all the old men and old women and all the children that were left behind for the moms and the dads that were taken off to work as slave laborers in Russia, they were considered as orphans. They put them into Yugoslav. And my one grandmother, who survived, came to America. She and I slept together in the living room couch I was 12 until I was 14, and we would talk about this. And I didn't realize a lot of things that my grandmother told me she didn't share with anybody except myself, because I was more or less her ally. And she told me what it was like in Yugoslav. She told me how my grandfather died, my mother's father, that one night. And it was just the two grandmothers. And his last words were, please give me salt. And they couldn't fulfill his wish. They wrapped him in a blanket. It was nighttime. They had to deposit him outside like the garbage, because in the next day, the death wagon would come. And they hoped and prayed that they would keep him wrapped in the blanket, but they didn't. They took him out of the blanket, threw him on the wagon with the rest of the dead. And this was a sometimes twice a day ritual. And my grandmother told me how they got every second, third day food. They didn't get any food for a couple of days, and the food that they got was nothing but raw cracked corn, which they were put in houses in Yugoslav, and they had started tearing down the doors and the window frames and to make a fire so they could cook this, so they could eat it. And one day it was her turn to rip up the floorboards. And as she ripped up the floorboards, there she found in a rag, a package wrapped in a rag. She took it up, unwrapped it, and it was a prayer book. And this prayer book, she always said, kept her alive. And this prayer book brought her to us again, because she had hope. And if you go to the art gallery, the prayer book is there. I brought it so you could see it. I usually take this prayer book when I speak and I pass it around, but this time we just have to look at it through the glass. So this was my grandmother's story, and I shared a lot of stories with her. She didn't die until 63 when we were married. And she always said, now I can go home to your, she said, I can go home to your grandfather because I know you have a nice husband. We were in Yugoslavia in that camp in Karlsdorf for till 1947, and we were shipped to other camps in June of 1947, but the last memory I have of my hometown is, see, we played games. We had nothing to play with. The boys made this game of jumping over the ditch. And having a brother and a cousin, I wanted to do that too. So one spring day, we had no uniforms, we had whatever we had on our backs, And one spring day, that spring day, my mother called me into the barrack and she said, "Here, I have a pair of booties for you." That's what we wore. We had no shoes. "And this is the last wool we have. Don't lose them." And I just went, I was 6 years old. I remember jumping out the window, out the door, and seeing everybody playing in the yard. And all of a sudden, I heard somebody call my name. And they said, "Hey, why don't you try jumping over the ditch?" And I thought, yeah, maybe my legs grew. And I started to run, and I sprinted, and I jumped up into the air, and I landed in the middle of the ditch. I was stuck. I was screaming. It was like quicksand. I was over my knees, up to my thighs in human secretion. So 4 hands plucked me out, and I landed on dry land. And when I looked down on my feet, they were gone. I went running to my mother. She always fixed everything. She took one look at me and she said, "Where are they?" And I started crying, and she said, "Where are they?" And then she started spanking me. She spanked me so hard I threw up. I did not forgive my mother until I was 25 and I had my first child, because I finally realized she had nothing. She had no idea where my father was, if he was alive or dead. She gave me the last she had, and here I lost it in the ditch. From there we went to Novo Selo, which was by the Danube across from Vukovar. And there we were for the whole summer. And this is where I had my first freedom. We could run through the streets. They took the moms to work in the fields. There was only about 100 of us. There were only 2 houses with slave laborers. And across the street from us was this beautiful tree in a garden. This beautiful tree in the garden had one thing that I wanted a lot: pears, food. So I'm at the gate and I'm staring at the pears, so mesmerized, I didn't see the woman coming out of the house. And all of a sudden I hear this woman call to me, and I startled. And she comes to the gate, she opens the gate, she takes my hand, she walks me to the trees, to the tree, picked the biggest pear, gave it to me, and said something in Serbian. I had no idea what she was talking about. And had me come to the door. And here, she goes inside, and she comes out with a huge piece of white bread. And she gave me this and sent me off on my way. I went back to where we stayed, and we never ate everything real quick. It was very slow. And I ate my good stuff. Could hardly wait for my mom to come home. When she came home, I told her the story, and I said, she kept on repeating this. What did she want? What did she want? And my mother laughed, and she said, "She called you little lady." And I was so happy, because they usually spit at you and called you names. So this was my first very good lesson in life, because here was a Serbian woman who fed me. If she would have been caught, every day I went there, she fed me that whole summer. And she was kind to me. I learned one lesson, that not everybody is evil in one group or all good, that we all have something to be ashamed of and something to be proud of. From there we escaped. We were put to Gakova, where we escaped, and we crossed across Hungary and into Austria, and there we found out my dad was still alive, who lived in Munich, and we got, by hook or by crook, we got over there because we had no papers. And we lived in Munich, bombed out Munich for 2.5 years till 1950, and then we came to, my uncle brought us over here to Barrington, Illinois in 1950, on April 28th. It'll be 60 years this April that I'm